Good evening. So this is a little bit different for you tonight. It was a surprise, so I think you guys are going to be in for a big treat. A couple of things first, which might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but when you're finished eating, you're going to have some utensils that if you could help us all out by taking those to the back of the room, and there are tubs and places on the tables that are marked for the appropriate utensil. So if you don't mind putting those there, that would be greatly appreciated. Second of all, there is some food that is coming out. Please don't eat it. There is some information that is going to go along with it, and so if I see anybody eating, then you get a 0 for the night, so just so you know. All right, if you don't know, I'm Paula Travis. I'm the coordinator for the Sagan National Colloquium, and usually Chris Spink is the one doing the introductions. However, no thanks to Hurricane Sandy, he's still in Italy, so, you know, for a whole week, how shameful is that, so. But it was to my benefit because I get to do the introduction tonight, so I'm very pleased about that. When Chris and I first started talking about the colloquium and talking about things about food and what we wanted all of you to have an experience with, you know, again, things came up about, you know, where does your food come from? What is it doing to your body? And, you know, what chemicals are being used in the production of food? And there were so many different things that kept, the technology of it kept arising. And we realized that the most important thing about food is it's good. And we love to eat, no matter where it comes from, no matter how it was prepared. We all, you know, like to sit down to a good meal. And a lot of that comes from maybe our own background and maybe our own childhood memories of good food and sharing with our family. And so tonight what I wanted to do is to try to recreate a little bit of, you know, a family style eating. And so that's why I've decided to set up tables and have all of you, you know, sitting around and passing food, and maybe you get to meet somebody you haven't ever met before. That's hopefully what comes out of all of this. Except the most important thing is, you know, you get to have great food, and those who didn't come to tonight's event, you know, missed out on a great opportunity. So, so I'm very, very happy about that. When we started talking about, you know, okay, let's bring in something that says, you know, food is wonderful, food is great, my first thought was Avesta. And anybody that, most of you students are too young to remember, but Avesta had an amazing restaurant on Sandusky Street. And as members of the OWU community, we were saddened when she departed from our town. And so I always had fond memories of her and the people that worked there, and it was a big part of my life at that time. And so when the opportunity came up that we decided to do something with food and food preparation and food and family and food and culture, Avesta was the first person that came to mind, so I'm truly excited that she's here and gets to be a part of this with me and with you. Introducing Avesta tonight is a student, and she's been with the Colloquium for 4 years now, but it's not for those reasons that I chose her to do the introduction tonight. Her name is Maggie Argero, and she and I got a chance to talk in depth this morning, even though I knew a little bit about her. I got to learn a lot more, and I still felt like, you know, she had a connection with food, and it came from one of her first SNC papers that she submitted to me. So for all of you that think that I don't read them, I really do. And for one reason or another, Maggie's really made an impression, and I wanted to just read a little bit of that to you. Of course, she has a very nice beginning. So this is just an excerpt. On Sunday, I wake up to all kinds of delicious scents and sounds. Red peppers crackling as they roast, the lid of a pot bouncing as steam escapes, Mom banging a wooden spoon in time to the music on the radio, and bacon frying. Oh, the bacon. I steal bits of pieces throughout the day. When my friends come over, they watch in awe and envy as Mom slices, simmers, and sings along to the radio, her voice lifting as the pasta water comes to a boil. Ladies and gentlemen, Maggie Arguero.
Thank you. So as Paula said, we did talk earlier today about, what I might say tonight, and I left with this question of what makes good food. And so I've been thinking about it all day, and came up with this little introduction. So tonight, Avesta Saaty will be speaking about her experiences with food and where those experiences have led her in the culinary industry from Ohio to Omaha and back again, always paying homage to an eclectic cuisine by Kurdish, Greek, Turkish, Persian, Arabic, and Eastern European traditions. For me, good food doesn't only have a good taste, there's a depth to a good dish, a good meal. As we sit around our tables, we tell each other stories, and so does our food. Avesta's food might tell about Ohio, Greece, Europe, or her family. As I stared into a pan of collard greens this past Tuesday, my first attempt at the dish, I thought about my grandma and her family roots in the southern United States. She doesn't often talk about growing up in the South or living in New Orleans. I don't know much about that part of her life. But these simple collard greens brought me a little bit closer to her story. And with all that history behind one bite, there's no doubt I was dining on the goodness of food. And there's no doubt that tonight we will be eating good food as well. So please join me in welcoming Avesta Saaty.
I'm a walker, so I'm going to just go ahead and hold this. Thank you, Maggie. That was a lovely introduction, and there is no better person to introduce me than someone that loves bacon, because those that know me know I have a deep love for bacon. So that was interesting. That was in your paper. First of all, I want to say that I'm very honored to be here tonight. I have a deep love for Ohio Wesleyan. It was a big part of my life also when I had my restaurant down on Sandusky Street. And my biggest supporters were people who are affiliated with Ohio Wesleyan. So thank you, Paula. Thank you, Ohio Wesleyan, for having me here tonight. There's nothing better that I can think of than talking about food and my culture and how those two things kind of came together in my life over the years, and taking me to where I've gone and where I will be going as far as my career goes. Just a little background on myself. I grew up in Southeast Ohio in Hocking Hills. I can say that now and everyone knows where it's at because people go camping there, and growing up no one knew where Logan was, but now I feel like it's probably the most popular area for people to go to. So that's where I grew up, which is kind of interesting. That background definitely molded me. My parents immigrated to the United States in the early 70s, and going to a small town like Logan was very interesting for someone that came from a different country. I remember, I'm Kurdish, but my parents came from Iraq, and I remember growing up and people would say, "You came from Iraq? Like under a rock?" So obviously back then no one had heard of Iraq, so it was interesting growing up there, but it molded me into the person that I am. Growing up in a very ethnic family where it was always crazy, lots of people, food, music, dancing. I have a few friends here in the audience that grew up with me, and they can attest to the crazy Saaty household, and it was fun. But then having that influence of small town Southeast Ohio, tip of Appalachia, really, really brought me down to earth, and I'm still very good friends with people I grew up with, and feel very blessed that I was given the opportunity to have a life there. And after high school, I went to Sweden to do a study abroad. And when I was there, they asked me, what do you like to do? What do you want to study? And I said, I don't know, I'm going to go to college, probably going to be a lawyer, all this. And they're like, but what do you want to do? And I said, well, I love to cook. And they said, well, we have a culinary school in town. Do you want to enroll? And I was like, really? Yeah. So that was the beginning of my culinary career. I studied there. It was a French-based culinary school, so that's why my cuisine is very eclectic, because I do incorporate a lot of French-based influences and try to combine those with my heritage, and then also try to combine that with growing up in Southeast Ohio, comfort food, Southern-style food. So if you never went to my restaurant, you would know that we had things like gourmet mac and cheese, baked brie, then we had kebabs, hummus, tabbouleh. It was a really, really fun menu, and I think that was part of the reason why I was so successful, because it was something, I had a niche. No one else was doing anything like that in Delaware, and a lot of the students who come here from other states and the coasts that are used to eating ethnic foods were really, really excited to be able to experience that in a small town. So that was my history as far as getting into the food business. But where the love of food actually started was obviously at home in the kitchen with my mom. We never ate McDonald's. We begged and pleaded for it, and I think we went like 4 times a year. The only thing we grew up eating was pretty much Kurdish food, and sometimes she would make spaghetti, but every day after school there was a pot of rice, beans or some sort of stew, and veggies, pita bread, flatbread, and sometimes meat. That's it. So I grew up learning how to cook from, I think, probably the age of 3, when I could actually hold a spoon or a knife. Whenever we had someone come over, even if someone called 15 minutes away, they're like, we're coming into Logan to visit, my mom would run in the kitchen and put together some amazing meal in like 15 minutes. So that's how I grew up. I never understood going out to eat or, buying things in a package or pre-made things. I had never even experienced that. I thought everyone cooked from scratch, and we raised our own chickens, and so it was difficult because we lived in Logan, and we would butcher our chickens and all of that right in town. We were free range and organic way before it was cool. So my mom grew her own veggies, everything in the garden. She made her own yogurt. So that Greek style yogurt that everyone loves today, I couldn't eat yogurt in the stores because it was so runny. I thought, this isn't yogurt. This isn't like my mom's yogurt. And so I'm really excited that there's Greek yogurt in the stores now, because that's what I'm used to, because she would just make it from scratch. So growing up like that, I think that I always knew that food would be a big part of my life. And then when I went to culinary school, obviously, that put some ideas in my head. But kind of being first generation, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about going to college when it came to my parents. They were adamant about me going to school. So I went to college. I graduated from OU with a political science and broadcast journalism degree. I worked in TV news for a long time. I worked at Channel 10 and ONN in Columbus. And I did some work abroad and thought maybe someday I'd be a CNN correspondent. But the idea of the food business was always there. And I always worked at restaurants, because when you are a journalist and you first graduate, you don't make enough money to survive. So you always have to bartend or cook or serve in a restaurant. So I always was still in the restaurant business. So I was 29, and I thought, I'm gonna turn 30 next year and I'm not doing exactly what I wanna do. I still wanna have my own restaurant. I wanna be the chef, I have this idea. I wanna do this by the time I was 30. So that was it. Put that thought in my head. An opportunity came up. It was a fluke. I met a customer who owned a building in Delaware, and the rest is history, and that's how Avesta Eclectic Cuisine started. And we were open for almost 5 years there, and I miss it every day. I miss Delaware, I miss Ohio Wesleyan. The restaurant was great. I went on and did other things, and now I'm back in Columbus, and I'm actually doing consulting and marketing for restaurants and bars. So I'm still kind of in the food industry, but I felt like I needed, because when I went to Omaha, I owned a catering company, private chef company, and did events, and it was a lot of work. And this is the first year in my life that I am not working weekends, nights, holidays, because between being a journalist and a chef or a bartender or server, all those jobs that I ever had in my life, since I was 15, I have never had weekends, nights, holidays off until this year. So I figured I'm gonna take a little break from actually cooking, except for friends and family and special events like this, and just do the business side of the food industry. So that's pretty much my story, and here I am. I'm not sure how many of you guys know about the Kurds. Unfortunately or fortunately for the Kurds, both wars in Iraq did put a lot of media attention on us and who we are, and a little bit of background. The Kurds are not just in Iraq. They're spread out through Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and then old parts of the USSR near Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, those areas. So I want to show you guys a little video to give you a little history about the Kurds, because I feel like it's important. This first video is not, the beginning is a little disturbing, but I cannot deny the horrific history of the Kurds, and I feel like it's a good base for you guys to at least get a little bit knowledge of my people, and then we're gonna get into the fun stuff about the food and all that stuff. But I just kind of want to go through this video so you guys have an idea of where we're talking about, because some people might not even know the geography of where I'm talking about. So this video will give you some background of the Kurds.
There is a saying among the Kurds, no friends in the mountains. For indeed, the world has scarcely noticed that century after century, conqueror after conqueror has driven these once nomadic tribes deep within their beloved mountains to preserve their culture, their language, and their lives. Hidden in the shadows of history, resistance against oppression became the Kurdish way of life, until atrocities inflicted by a dictator named Saddam Hussein sent shockwaves throughout the world, causing people of every nation to ask, who are the Kurds? For many, awareness arrived on Bloody Friday in March of 1988, when Saddam dropped poisonous gas on the Kurdish city of Halabja, killing 5,000 within minutes, followed by 7,000 more as the bombing continued for days. Halabja was not Saddam's only chemical attack against Iraq's Kurds. It was simply the worst, captured in all its horrific detail, making it a symbol of the atrocities committed by Saddam Hussein.
Saddam's tried to wipe the Kurdish people from the face of the earth. The people in Kurdistan, they are so happy because of the liberation, and because now they can live in peace and free.
To trace the history of the Kurds, one must begin at the beginning. For it was here, in the land some believe was once the Garden of Eden, that this resilient ancient people first left their mark upon the world. Nourished by the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, archaeologists believe it was within this cradle of civilization, the Kurdish ancestors first pioneered agriculture, animal husbandry, weaving, metalwork, and the making of pottery. For visitors, a trip through the land of the Kurds is a trip through biblical history. The great prophets' name, Jonah, Habakkuk, and Daniel are all buried within the vast borders of what came to be known as Kurdistan. The city of Ahmadiyya still stands, marking the place many believe wise men, known as Magi, began their journey to follow a great that appeared in the sky. As centuries passed, these tribes would fall to the forces of Alexander the Great at the Battle of Okinawa, and later rise to their zenith as trainers along the legendary Silk Road. In time, the Mongol hordes would make them prisoners, followed the Ottomans who would make them presents. But whether their occupiers were good or bad, killers or saints, the Kurds would learn to do what they must to survive. At the end of World War I, the Kurds were finally promised independence with the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire and the creation of new nation-states. Instead, with the stroke of a pen, Kurdistan was parceled out among Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. Today, the world's 30 million Kurds, equivalent to the population of Canada, make up the largest ethnic group in existence without a recognized state of their own.
We are neither Arabs, nor Turks, and not Persians. We are Muslims, but we are a different nation. We have our own language, our own history, and our own folklore and everything.
The fact that we Kurds are a completely different ethnic group than the Arabs and the Turks and even the Persians. Because of that background and also because of all of the suffering they have seen, they have completely different mindset.
At the time when the Central Director regime, before the toppling of Saddam Hussein, was busy with creating weapons of mass destruction, we were busy granting treaties and creating new classes at our universities and opening new departments and building centers of education for our children and for our youth. We are trying to build a nation. We are trying to improve the scientific standards of our community. We are trying to spread democracy. We are trying to teach the people how to respect each other and accept the rights of children and women in general.
This country is a peaceful country. The people are very, very lovely. I don't think that our region will be down between us and another countries and other cultures.
The Kurds are an ancient people who've lived their entire lives at a crossroads of the world, accustomed to living with people of many different religions. Today, as in the days of old, you'll find in the hearts of the Kurdish people ethnic and religious tolerance.
Today, for instance, in Kurdistan, you see churches beside mosques in the Kurdish cities. You know, we have Christians, we have Armenians, we have Yazidis, we have Muslims, we have Jews, we have all kinds of religions and ethnic groups, and we've been living together for ages. And that shows, you know, how tolerant the Kurdish people are.
In the cities of Kurdistan, you'll see not only Kurds, but Arabs, Turkmen, Assyrians, Armenians, Chaldeans, Shia, Sunni, all living peacefully side by side, because this is who they are. This is how Kurdistan has always been, long before the country of Iraq ever existed.
Okay, so that was just a little history. That's primarily, obviously, talking about the Kurds in Iraq, but pretty much the same story in all the other countries. Very oppressed people, in there were years where you weren't allowed to learn your language, or you would be imprisoned or even executed. So part of my personality probably comes from that background, as he said. When I think about tolerance and just, growing up, I feel like my parents raised us with that mindset, because when I look at my sisters and my brother and I, we are very, very open-minded and tolerant of all people. And because we have family members that are Christian, Muslim, there's Jewish Kurds, like the video said. So it's a dream, hopefully, of mine that, the Middle East and that area can hopefully maybe someday live more like the way the Kurds live, and how they are able to live amongst each other in Kurdistan. So, any questions on that part right now? All right, so what I'm really here for is to talk about food, and I'm going to do a little video with some pictures about typical Kurdish food. Some of it will look familiar to you because of the region that we're in. Obviously, Kurdish cuisine is very influenced by Turkish, Persian, Arabic, and Eastern European food. We have our own style of that. If you look on your table, there's baklava, but I will tell you, it doesn't taste like Greek baklava. It's my mom's Kurdish baklava. There is a yogurt and cucumber kind of salad on the table, which you might think of tzatziki, but we call it mastu khayar, and that is served with the pita bread. Yogurt is huge in the Kurdish society. We eat a lot of it. And then you're going to see dolma or dolmade, and it is the stuffed grape leaves. These ones are vegetarian, in case anyone is wondering. Everything we're serving tonight is vegetarian. It is usually served with lamb or ground beef, but we made everything vegetarian. And then you have the basmati rice, and then the beans, which go on top of the rice, which was one of probably our most popular dishes at the restaurant. So you guys are able to experience something. We served all of this stuff at the restaurant, but the beans and rice were really popular. And even if you don't like beans, just try a tiny bit, or try a little bit of the sauce on the rice, because so many of my American friends hated rice growing up until they came and tasted my mom's rice, because it is something else. You can eat that rice plain, it's delicious. But when you put the red beans or just the sauce on it, it's a whole nother experience. So as I am going to show the pictures of the food, you can start serving yourself. Like Paula said, family style. Because the biggest thing I remember growing up is we had a kitchen table, but we never ate at it. In the Kurdish culture, we take picnicking to like a whole nother level. It is crazy, I'm not kidding. And my friends that grew up with me, my mom would put a tablecloth on the living room floor and serve food picnic style every night. And that is very, very typical in the Kurdish culture. We always eat that way. Arabs do sometimes too, and Lebanese. I don't know why, but it's fun. And then you know what? Growing up, we had amazing dinners. I mean, we all knew each other very well in my family. We talked every night. There was no radio on, no TV. It was sitting on the floor with lots of homemade good food, and we talked. So this is kind of what Paula wanted you guys to experience tonight. So dig in, and then I'm going to show the video of the food. And the music is very typical Kurdish music that's with the food, so kind of want you guys. Music is huge in the Kurdish culture, and so this will kind of give you an idea of the beat. It's very typical. I think he's getting that started. No, not that would burn your mouth. I don't really think that you would think they're spicy. They're very well seasoned. I do too, but we were afraid, because if I was eating that, my mom would know to make it extra spicy, but. And my mom came here from Phoenix just for this, so I don't know where she is. I need to introduce her. All right, what do you guys think? It's good? And it's all so healthy. That was the great thing, though, growing up, not eating like prepackaged food, stuff with a bunch of preservatives, you know, fast food, that kind of stuff. I mean, people are always like, how are you turning 40 this year? I'm like, it's what I put in my body. Like, it's very important. I grew up always knowing exactly what I was eating. Every ingredient in every dish I ever ate, I knew exactly how it was made, where it came from, what it was, and I really love the idea that this is what you guys have been talking about, because if you really look into a lot of ethnic foods, you can pretty much pick out what's in it. So being open to trying different foods and different kinds of foods will actually lead you to eating healthier. And it's been kind of something of mine that I've been really trying to spread the word about reading packages when you buy stuff in the grocery store, or picking where you're going to eat lunch or dinner, things like that. Just, I feel like with my background, there's proof. My aunts who are like in their 50s look like they're 40. So just remember that when you are choosing what you're putting in your body, how important it is. So it's not about calories and things like that. I don't think that way at all. I think about eat real food, good food, healthy food, and you will be just fine. So as if you were watching the video, we're going to talk about the Kurdish cuisine. Our diet includes primarily a variety of fruits, vegetables, and beans. Cucumbers are really common and used a lot. I remember growing up, my mom would just have sliced cucumbers on the table whenever we had dinner. Our dessert, it was like a special occasion if we had baklava. It was mostly a bowl of fresh fruit. So fruit is huge, and that's, again, if you start eating fruit and thinking of it as your dessert, you're not going to miss the sugar from the chocolate cake or whatever that you're used to, or the cookie or candy bar, because your body starts getting used to that sweetness, and you're just going to feel better. Our meats that we primarily use are lamb and chicken. The Kurds, because they live in the mountains, herd sheep, so they eat a lot of lamb. And then they do raise chickens. There's a little bit of beef, but not much, and then some seafood in parts where the Kurds are near water, but primarily lamb and chicken. We have a lot of rice dishes, and we do a lot of savory stews that we serve over rice, like the beans that you're eating. We also do a lot of stuff like lamb with different kinds of vegetables, either okra or green beans, in a tomato-based sauce, and then you serve that over the rice just like you did the beans, or if you think of it like, you know, a Chinese stir-fry over rice, that would be our version, but it's more a stew made with lamb and vegetables. Because our climate and soil is a little different than the rest of the Middle East, you know, growing up, a lot of people thought I grew up in the desert and, you know, was around camels, because that's all they think of when they think of the Middle East is Saudi Arabia or any of the desert countries. But if you looked at the video, you can see the Kurdish or Kurdistan is primarily in areas that would remind you of Colorado. So a lot of my family members love going to Colorado, Utah, because it reminds them of home. I have aunts that live in Switzerland and Sweden, and they feel like that's very similar to home. So what we can grow in those areas, grapes, obviously. So grape leaves, obviously, are huge. Pomegranates, figs, and lots of nuts. Our dairy comes from, there are some goats, then we have sheep and buffalo that we make cheese or yogurt with that dairy. we make things called kufta and kuba, which are either wrapped in rice or bulgur wheat, and then the stuffing is ground beef usually, raisins, almonds, and you can find that in other like Arabic cultures or Turkish or Persian food. Like I said, that area, a lot of people will say it's their food. It's, you know, everyone's obviously invented, you know, baklava or, you know, stuffed grape leaves. The Greeks say it's theirs, we say it's ours, but everyone makes a version of their own in the area. We also do a lot of like pies. It wouldn't be a pie that what you're thinking of, more like maybe a shepherd's pie, except we don't do potatoes on top. It's just like a variety of different meats and a stew that's in a crust, and then it's baked. We always have salads of some sorts, finely chopped salads usually. Growing up, I remember eating a lot of cucumber, tomato, and onions, finely diced, and then just a little bit of lemon juice and olive oil on them. Or tabbouleh, which is the parsley-based salad, and that is always served. I think the thing about Kurdish people is they always feel like if you start the meal out with some veggies, then you won't eat as much of the other stuff, or it helps, my mom always said it helps you digest the food, and that's why you end it with fruit too, because they think the enzymes and the acid in the fruit helps you digest. I'm not sure, but that's always served at a Kurdish meal, is you start off with some sort of salad and end it with fruit. We make a lot of rice dishes like biryani that's, you know, filled with different meats, nuts, raisins, spices, similar to like Indian or Pakistani rice dishes. Again, just our own version of it. One thing I did remember growing up that I did not like, but I do like now, was something called sour, which is very, very, very common. It is made of a wheat grain that's boiled, sun-dried, and then they pound it in a mortar, and then the wheat is crushed in a mill, and then you boil it. And it's very, very healthy. At least that's what my parents told me growing up. And because of either different wars or things like that, that was a food that they could make and it wouldn't spoil. So if you think of one food that's definitely a Kurdish staple, I would say sour would definitely be that, and yogurt. We use a lot of fresh herbs, especially dill, parsley, and mint in our food, and even using, you know, mint in savory dishes, and nuts are very common. We put nuts in, like I said, rice dishes, in things like kuba or any of the stuffed like rice dishes. Nuts are always included in that. And what we drink a lot of is black tea. I think they put it in our bottles growing up, because I remember drinking black tea and milk with honey or sugar from when I was pretty much, I don't know, a baby. And I think there's a lot of caffeine in that, but I don't know. They do that. So it's like, it's got more milk and more sugar in it than tea. So I think that's how they justify it. We also do something with yogurt called mastau, which translates directly to yogurt water, which is basically what it is. You take yogurt, mix it with water, pour it on ice, put a little lemon juice in it, salt, and you drink it. And it sounds kind of crazy and weird, but it's delicious, refreshing. I know other cultures do drinks with yogurts, but that is something that is also served almost every day at a meal in the Kurdish family. The thing with breakfast is very important for the Kurdish people. Again, because they were nomadic herders, is probably why it was so important. You wake up in the morning, you got to eat something that's good for you and will sustain you through the day, because you're going to be traveling, herding, farming. So what we usually have on a table at breakfast is yogurt, honey. You can either put the honey on the yogurt and eat it with the Kurdish people don't eat pita, so to say. We eat, I don't know if you all got some of that bread, but there is a flat bread that's kind of looks like pita, but it's not openable. It's just a flat bread. That's more like what we would eat. And then you serve it with that. we serve our honey with the honeycomb, and that's because they think that's where a lot of the nutrients are, so you actually eat the honeycomb. So it sounds weird, but it doesn't taste bad, and if all the nutrients are in there, then I guess it's worth it. There's always cheese, slices of cheese at the breakfast table, and always do scrambled eggs, but we saute them with tomatoes and onions and tahini paste. Just like you guys all grew up eating peanut butter, I had a jar of tahini paste and would spread it on flatbread. And again, it might sound crazy, but try it. There's a lot of really good nutrients in tahini. It's really good for you. And people are a little more used to it now because hummus is popular, and that's what it is in hummus. But to eat it kind of like straight is maybe an acquired taste, but it's really, really good for you. And then, of course, always black tea. The Kurds, one thing that stands out from them is their idea of celebration. Believe me, we will make any excuse to have a party and dance. And I didn't really talk about my dress, but I'm sure you all noticed that I'm not wearing something from Macy's. My mother actually made this. I wore this in June for my little sister's wedding because when we get married, almost every Kurd that I know, you have your Kurdish wedding the night before, and then you have your American wedding the next night. So if you marry a Kurd, you get 2 big parties. So what this is very typical. Like I said, one thing that stands out with the Kurds, unlike some of the areas in the Middle East, is we're very showy. We love color. We love jewelry, makeup. We love our hair. It's always long and big and down. If you see the lines of women dancing, you'll see just lots of hair and lots of color. And, I don't know if you heard the part in the video about, we're trying to, educate our children and give rights to our women. Believe me, in my family, the women were not oppressed. They are the rulers of the roost. And I think that's very typical for the Kurdish culture, which, again, makes them a little different for the area in certain parts. So this is very typical of what you would wear to a party. And our biggest celebration is called Nowruz, which is our New Year, which is in March. And so what you would do is make a lot of food. Typically, most Kurds will want to have a picnic. So growing up, we would go, usually we'd have to go to Nashville or DC or Detroit, where I think the most of the Kurds live. I think in all of the United States, I actually did look this up because when someone meets me and they're like, what's your background? I'm like, I'm Kurdish. They're like, I've never met a Kurd. I'm like, you probably haven't. There's not that many of us here. There's 37 million Kurds in the whole world, primarily in those countries we talked about earlier. And then there's a lot of Kurds, I think about a couple 100,000 in Europe. In Canada, there's 18,000 Kurds in all of Canada. In the United States, let's see, there is about 40,000. So that's why you've probably never met a Kurd. In all of America, 250 million people, we got 40,000. So what we would do is, when you have any sort of celebration in the Kurdish culture, is you would have a big picnic. The women would dress up. There's music, lots of food, and the dolma that you ate, the stuffed grape leaves, is always going to be at a celebration, mostly because it's also something that you can make and then you don't have to worry about it going bad, especially if you don't make it with meat. It's something that, you can take and then you can eat it warm, you can eat it cold, room temperature. And a lot of the food that we eat, a lot of the history behind it had to do with whether you could keep it because the Kurds were nomadic. Things like yogurt you can make. I know we refrigerate everything here, but growing up, my mom would make yogurt and keep it in the pan, in the oven, covered, and it never went bad. So the history of a lot of the food, like the yogurt, the dolmas, the reason why we eat so much of it, the bulgur wheat that I was talking about, the sour, was because there was no access to refrigeration, and they lived in the mountains. So there was snow, so if they made something, they could stick it there, but otherwise it would have to be something that wouldn't go bad. So that's about it. I pretty much feel like I've given you a nice little history of the Kurds, the kind of food we eat, why food was so influential in my life. I think the biggest thing if you ever meet someone who's Kurdish, they will always feel like their one connection to their land, their people. Because for someone like me, growing up here, I went to Lebanon to do a journalism project, but that's the closest I've been back to Kurdistan, and I probably will never go back. So the only way that I have been able to kind of keep my culture alive and teach my friends and teach customers and my son about who I am and where I came from was through food. Because anytime I cook and sit down with someone, whether it's a customer or a friend or a family member, and we start talking about what I cooked, they start getting it. They feel the love that I have for my culture and my people, and there's no better way to get someone to listen up than to cook them something. So that's pretty much my story. Do you guys want to start some questions, maybe? Anyone?
Yes. I'm interested in what you were saying about the dairy and how you don't refrigerate it. This past summer, I had my first experience with milk camphor, and I was wondering if that was what you were talking about, fermented milk drinks for the probiotics and the health benefits.
Well, definitely, because the reason why yogurt is so important, the wives or the mothers or the women would make yogurt, which sits out, it ferments. That's the real process of making yogurt. And as it ferments, it gets thicker and thicker, we use it as an antibiotic. And when the Peshmerga, which is the freedom fighters, the Kurdish fighters, would have to leave, they would make a lot of yogurt, and they would eat it and take it with them for infection because we had no antibiotics. So I know that there are a lot of people who tell you that dairy is bad for you, and I don't drink milk. I've never drank a glass of milk since I was a kid, but I've grown up eating yogurt, and knock on wood, I'm very healthy, and I feel like part of it is because I eat yogurt almost every day.
So is that yogurt that's made from raw milk that hasn't been pasteurized, or do you just get the milk from the grocery store and make your own yogurt?
My mom's done both. She preferred the raw milk, obviously. And when we had we had a farm too. We had a farm and had access, and friends that had farms growing up in Southeast Ohio, obviously we would get the raw milk. I have a personal issue about the fear of pasteurizing everything, and, I ate brie when I was pregnant, and, I don't know. We have a lot of rules and regulations in this country, but certain things, and you're not supposed to be able to buy raw milk. Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm not going to stand up here and talk about it, but I'll just tell you that when we raised our own animals and had access to raw milk, that it would make a much better product. Yes. Yes.
You've talked a lot about sourcing your ingredients yourself. I know you're not in the restaurant business anymore, but when you were cooking for people, did you still feel the need to source locally and organically?
Oh yeah, we shopped a lot at the farmers markets. We worked with a couple farms here in the northern part of, I guess, Delaware County and Franklin County, and whatever we were able to get, especially in the summers, obviously, because we used a lot of fresh vegetables in our restaurant. And not only was it smarter and healthier to get it. It was cheaper to get it locally than to order it from Cisco. So definitely, and even in my life today, and a lot of the people that are in my friendship circle are big advocates of buying local, supporting local farmers. And growing up in Hocking County, I mean, I have really, really good friends who are farmers still. Their fathers are, and so yeah, anytime and every time that I can use something local, definitely am an advocate. All right, I see my mother walking up here. I want to introduce her. She flew here from Phoenix. Her name's Shobo, and you really have her to thank for the food, because these are, I mean, I like I said, I learned from the best, because she makes things like in 5 minutes, and it's like, how did you just do that? And it's delicious and amazing. And so, Mom, thank you. Good, yeah. Now, any other questions? Yes.
My husband is ethnically Chinese, and when we started dating and got married, and I was hanging out with his family, the food was so foreign to me and to my family. They grew up in the West. When you moved here to start an eclectic cuisine restaurant in Delaware, Ohio, what was that like at first? And I know how well it went, the responses you got eventually, but did you have any troubles in the beginning with people just freaked out by it?
Actually, like we did, I think the people of Delaware were starving for something besides a cheeseburger, because we tried to do a soft opening with just friends and family, invite only, and there was a line out the door like a mile long, and we ran out of food. Of course we weren't prepared, and of course there were angry people, and I'm like, you're not even supposed to be here. Like, this is not open to you. It was really hard to keep up. I mean, it was crazy. I think that when you looked at my menu, anyone could have eaten there, and that's what a lot of the food critics, I mean, we got rave reviews from John Christensen from the Dispatch, the Grumpy Gourmet, Doral Chenoweth, who's known in Columbus for his reviews and how he usually hates most restaurants. He really loved my restaurant and our food, and I think that because we didn't try to do anything too complicated. It was a lot of simple stuff. It was just good. And my mom and I cooked every day. We didn't throw it off to someone else. I mean, there were different sous chefs and obviously prep cooks and people that helped us, but we did not have a life for a long time. And I think that, when you serve something like beans and rice, even someone, it's not like it's, there's things that we eat in the, I grew up eating chicken feet, sounds crazy, but we did. We make soup out of it, and it's really good because that's where a lot of flavor is. And stuffed lamb stomach, crazy. We didn't serve that stuff. We weren't gonna get crazy and do that kind of stuff. It's like beans and rice and hummus and tabbouleh. And the funny thing is, at lunch, a lot of times I would look out in the dining room and be shocked. There was a lot of blue collar, I could tell what they were wearing, blue collar guys, and they were eating the kebabs and the gyros, and they were like, we love it, it's just, I think, fortunately, in the last maybe 10 years, Middle Eastern food is becoming more popular and more, accessible, and Ohio Wesleyan, okay, half the students are from the coast, others are from other countries, and then, it's a liberal arts school. Most people are very open-minded and willing and wanting to try new things. And so, as far as that went, when you walk by a restaurant and you see a bunch of people in there, and you kind of have a question and you're originally from Delaware, but even if they were all students, you'd be like, well, there's a lot of people in there. I'm going to go in there and try something. We had our, naysayers, but everyone does. I learned from the very beginning that if I took everything personally or my feelings got hurt because I couldn't please every customer, I would have jumped off a cliff. There's no way. In that industry, there are people who loved my restaurant and still talk about it, but I'm sure there are people who will say they hated it, but and that's why you've got other restaurants like Buns and McDonald's and all these other places where you can go to if that's more your style of food. No. Anyone else? Questions? Hello? Hey, why don't you guys talk talk about growing up? These two right here, Amy and Michelle, are my childhood friends, and they can maybe, one of them, just give you a little idea about going to the Saaty house and your first experience of eating there, because you both grew up eating very American food. She did dye her hair black once because she wanted to be ethnic like me.
Yeah. Oh no, but I'm just saying it was just, truth be told, I believe that the Kurds are the most welcoming, amazing people that I have ever known. And gorgeous food, gorgeous people, and celebration is very true. So yeah, you guys are really lucky that you got to talk to Avesta tonight. So I hope you take a little of her, be a little Kurdish tomorrow.
Anyone else? Anything? No? Anything else? Okay, well, thank you guys very much. It was really, really an honor to be here, and it was fun. I hope you guys learned something, ate some good food, and spread the word of eating good, clean food.